This video is sponsored by KnucklesOX, Baba Snake, Julio the Boy, Blazing Darkness G, and Danny Mash X. If you'd like to directly support my content, as well as catch it early, have your name credited as a sponsor, or maybe even have your What If Ideas produce its commissions, consider visiting the links to my Patreon and such in the description below. Piccolo Turned Good Early has always been a story that makes Dragon Ball a bit easier, and this super special will be no different, though a bit strange and interesting in how it does so, since we're now going to tackle all the at the time of writing most recent mainline Dragon Ball content as best we can, starting first with the events of Dragon Ball Daima and the Piccolo Turned Good Early timeline. Now, admittedly, because I don't think the events and challenges of Daima would be long enough or difficult enough for the Z-Fighters in this story, I would actually like to do what would be our Daima special here. While Daima could still be approached in very interesting ways in this scenario, I feel that you would need to change so many aspects of its original run that it may be worth spawning a rebooted version of this story exploring a Piccolo who has turned good early or been raised by Kami as a Z-Fighter, also venturing into the demon realm earlier, and perhaps interacting with some of the early instances we saw of it, and the anime-only characters from Goku Goes to Demon Land, as a way to get into the demon realm content quicker and spend more time with it and exploring Majin lore and concepts. It's also something that could certainly take place if the Piccolo Turned Good Early timeline had a less easily solved Majin Buu saga, since if it could finally push the Earth to remake its own permanent set of Dragon Balls again, that would actually make the events of Daima far more possible. But with no Shenron to make Goma's wish on, the other immediate options would arguably be Purunga or Chirumbo. Though Purunga is definitely the most logical, he needs to swallow pills as second best option, as he would also offer more wishes than just one, which would make going to Namek a worthwhile gamble as well. But that presents his own set of issues, like the Namekian Dragon Ball still being protected by Nail, and a much stronger warrior tribe of Nameks, who the Demon King would basically need to spend a wish on to get past, to make another wish on to get past some other guys. And even if Goma was able to maybe trick them by leaning on Degasu's wits and diplomacy, it's very possible that the wishes needing to be made in the Namekian language, which only Neva seemed capable of doing, would present an instant halt to Goma's ambitions. And it's generally a coin toss as to whether or not Neva would or wouldn't decide to help Goma pull off a hat trick of wishes to debuff their enemies, since a lot of his actions seem to be just for his own amusement and self-interest. That said, with or without the wish to make everyone that could get in their way mini-kid versions of themselves, there wouldn't be a Dende to kidnap, unless they want to take the child version of Otamori, I suppose. So I believe this timeline's version of the Dragon Team could pull the mission to the Demon Realm off rather seamlessly, even with similar constraints to the canon Daima, being not taking characters like Gohan or Good Buu. For one thing, our characters are just a lot further along here, like this Vegeta and Goku already having had and trained against each other using Super Saiyan 3 in the afterlife, making the use of the form a lot easier for them during the course of Daima, and meaning they are tougher overall, whether children or not. And while Piccolo wouldn't have access to the forms he obtains during Super at this point in the timeline, as Daima would take place between parts 6 and 7 of the story, Piccolo's mastery of Kaioken at the time still had him as Goku and Vegeta's equal, mind you. Not to mention, with the Buu Saga incident being resolved easier than it was in canon, that Piccolo will have spent the year training with and spending time with Buu rather than Mr. Satan, along with Goku and Vegeta likely dropping in from time to time for spars, just as we see in the opening recap of Daima during episode 1, meaning they all would have only gotten stronger than the points they were at, which were already eclipsing their canon counterparts, as the top Z warriors, and honestly strongest in Universe 7, are easily Piccolo, Goku, Vegeta, Buu, and Gohan at this era of the timeline, with no mentions of a god of destruction in their angel just yet. Thus, all three demon worlds, the Tamigami battles, and the fight against the third-eye demonically empowered King Goma and his forces would all be far easier for the Z-Fighters, if they were to happen here, especially with these powered-up fighters being accompanied by Pansy and Glorio as their guides. And in the case that Buu doesn't attend the excursion into the Majin realm, which I couldn't imagine this version missing out on, unlike his canon counterpart, I think he'd ensure to find a way to go. If he was sleepy, he'd take a hyperbolic time chamber nap, and if he were hungry, he'd load up on snacks, since this Piccolo-trained version of Buu is both more disciplined like Piccolo, but also still reasonably fun-loving and adventure-seeking like Goku, and his presence as Kid Buu or not would be invaluable, since with his power never having been reincarnated into Oob, and Buu now training with the god of a planet and spending time with the Kais, it's likely the Grand Supreme Kai's consciousness could be awoken by Buu or relied upon for extra aid, meaning any assistance that the Supreme Kai Shin, or Nahare as Buu would already be aware is his true name, would be magnified, since the Grand Supreme Kai is implied to be magnitudes older, and stronger than both the younger Glend, Kibito, and Old Kai alike, meaning he's also a lot more likely to know about the demon realm. This could have all sorts of implications, from Buu instantly pointing out the third eye on Hybus' belt, to his maybe already being aware that the Tertian Oculus used to be a part of a set of 3, just like the Demon Realm Dragon Balls. Thus, when they stop off with the Demon Realm shop for supplies, he may point the other 2 eyes out to Pansy early, creating the genuine possibility that Goma's powers are directly countered by the other 2 third eyes, being wielded by another demonically empowered fighter like Piccolo or Buu. Truly, the most interesting interactions, and the real draw draw for a Daima in this timeline at the end visually would likely be that Goku and Vegeta would be ready and capable of utilizing Super Saiyan 4 at this stage, if not, absorbing it into their base forms, which would either solidify this as a branch stemming from the already branched timeline of Piccolo Turned Good Early, like the GT Special sits as, or would possibly have this version of Daima tying heavily into GT, since I don't really want to go back and retcon that Goku and Vegeta have had Super Saiyan 4 all this time in the what if. Aside from that, as mentioned, a third-eyed Piccolo and Buu would also be extremely sick, though if Never decided to give Piccolo a demonic power boon, or maybe if he was able to figure out how to give himself one, through syncing with the absorbed spirit of Granolah Guru and Kami within him, Piccolo could attain his red form from the GT Special, taking on Goma in a mighty clash of demonic power, and by the Tertian Oculus, in a strange and very roundabout way that was never at all intended, fulfilling Piccolo Jr.'s original purpose of seeing his father, as after defeating Goma, he would likely be one of the immediate candidates for the next Demon King. Aside from this, I would think the other obvious draw for a Daima in this timeline is Piccolo and Buu interacting with Dr. Adensu, as well as Majin Ku and Majin Du, which would admittedly be comedy gold, and a decent reason to get further use out of the newer Majins, as that also presents another interesting reason as to why I believe earlier doing Daima could make for a really fun full reboot of this timeline, since had Daima preceded Super when they were coming out as anime, I would have had a lot of fun including Ku and Du throughout the course of Super's battles, and maybe having a fun parallel and follow through of Piccolo in this timeline, earlier coming to understand concepts of love and romance and what Goku's duty as a partner to someone in a marriage are, since this version of him takes those things so seriously, though now, just giving him his own version of Chi-Chi, as it would essentially kinda end up making Piccolo and Adensu funnily enough a couple with an unexpected amount of chemistry, and now co-parents to a weird trio of man-baby Majin kids, one of which is the new current Demon King, making them also weirdly the new demonic world family, who could likely use their new pull to get a lot done, as far as improving and protecting both the demon realm and Earth as their territories, as well as their inhabitants, like perhaps having a colony of the Namekians move back to their home of the second demon world, since Namek will at some point become far more crowded with this timeline's Namekians repopulating more successfully, and it will also be a way to ensure that should another catastrophe hit the Nameks, it will mean they always have a refuge somewhere, and also more attendants to help and look after the Tamagami as well. But even without delving into all of that which could possibly hold its own what if here, I do believe a faithful recreation of Dragon Ball Daima in this timeline specifically would be difficult to pull off without being a bit boring, just because many of the events would play out so idealized. So now, we'll move on to the events of the Granolah the Survivor Saga and the Piccolo Turned Good Early timeline. Now this arc is much more feasible to pull off this alternate universe admittedly, since we will resume our story exactly where we left the What If Piccolo Turned Good Early Super Special number 4 off at, which for now is still matching canon fairly well, just to give it the caveat that the cast as a whole is much stronger, but especially its leads. Not to mention that Vegeta has already discovered the power of destruction and even begun mastering his Ultra Ego in order to compete with Goku's Ultra Instinct, and Piccolo's I suppose we could call it Ultra Dragon, aka Dragon Warrior Namekian, or God of Creation mode. These three have also already many a time sparred in these forms against one another in conditions like the Hyperbolic Time Chamber or other harsh environments like Capsule Corp's Gravity Chamber, Planet Vampa, and King Kai's world, with that being at this point their most frequent pastime, with them even having frequently invited in newcomers and strong fighters like Broly, Gohan, Nail, Goten, Trunks, and Buu, with such intense unique sparring from time to time. And after the challenge that Moro presented, and their needing to rely on Superbuu, I can't imagine that our top trio wouldn't be fiercely training as hard as they could in order to make up for the defeat they face, while everyone else is doing their best to keep pace in anticipation for the next threat, having no idea that it is currently brewing out in space, amongst fighters with battle powers that wouldn't have seemed impressive to them since maybe the Namek Saga possibly, with there being nothing to really influence or change the introduction of Granolah and the Heaters in this timeline, other than of course the fact that Frieza was never revived here, thanks to the Earth having a lack of Dragon Balls, and the ones on Namek being far better protected, hence why we just skipped from Battle of Gods to the Term of Destroyers, resulting in Frieza's never being revived by the remnants of his empire and realizing his full potential to train and obtain even higher forms, which is also why he did not get to compete in the Tournament of Power to grow stronger and wiser still while being permanently revived. This means that Alek and his bounty hunters would likely already have been able to defeat and absorb the remnants of the Frieza Force, doing so in the background and dismantling and restructuring the organization as not so much a wholly more just and moral military force, but a more loosely organized but still highly regulated militia that could help keep some peace and deter some crimes throughout the universe, as a kind of group more reminiscent of the Hutt Cartel from Star Wars, a technically lawless group of bounty hunters, smugglers, and scoundrels, seen with a similar level of threat and clout as was carried by things like the Empire or the Republic, here just being something equal to Frieza's Empire of the Galactic Patrol though, with with Gas and Granolah likely sitting as the second and third blocks of the pyramid, as Elect's bodyguard and top hunter / secret executioner for any rogue or improper forces their cartel may have amongst their vastly increasing ranks, considering how many soldiers were available to attack Earth in the canon Resurrection F, and which I would have to imagine will be both more profitable and satisfying work for Granolah, since if he can't get his revenge on Frieza or the Saiyans immediately, then taking out the former Frieza Force members who act up, and who may literally be wearing the same armor the Saiyans that destroyed his home war like Cranberry was, that could be the next best thing. Not to mention, most of the reason Frieza has been treated so poorly in this timeline is that it was Piccolo who defeated him in Goku's place during the Namek Saga, as revenge for his decision to attack his homeworld and people. And when hearing that it was a warrior from a people under siege rather than a Saiyan who finally did Frieza in, it would probably make Granolah very affable to Piccolo, specifically in this timeline because he is not a Saiyan, he's a Namekian like Monaito, and because of his feat of brutally killing Frieza. I could therefore see this combined with Granolah possibly not completely hating his job, or the Heaters being wise enough to treat the Cerulean a bit better, and especially keep their mouths shut about the secret to his origin he doesn't know yet, since that's generally their most profitable outcome in this scenario. It would mean that Granolah in this timeline could either never end up making his wish, even when the second Cerulean Dragon Ball is found with the Shigarians, or that he might wait far longer to take it and make his wish, in order to be the strongest in the universe. However, that creates its own caveat, since as we just mentioned, our top strongest fighters that aren't gods in this timeline very often go into rooms of spirit and time, like Frieza was in during the course of the canon arc, excluding them as being counted in the universe technically for those wishes, meaning there is a much higher chance that Granolah here could end up not growing strong enough to present the same kind of threat he did in canon. He will most certainly still get a huge boost, just because other fighters in this universe are still a lot tougher than their canon counterparts, but it should still be noted that the chance of a worse role is certainly there. Assuming Granolah did successfully pull the wish off to get an even better boost than he did in canon though, that as well presents a bevy of problems, as the increased growth means an increased strain on Granolah's lifespan for it to rumble to even pull the wish off. Thus, Granolah could generally end up dying sooner, and with us still not knowing when that may have occurred in canon, it's uncertain how large a factor that would be, as he could keel over at really any point during the arc, with the same especially going for Gas. And even then, because he'd be more friendly to Piccolo, Granolah may be quicker talked down than in canon, avoiding a lot of the good guy versus good guy fighting of the arc in general. Not to mention that our strongest characters have access to more hacks, like the fact that they don't as often need to use sensu beans, and thus have a greater stockpile of them, or the fact that if they still needed to team up against Gas, even if Granolah didn't get a full boost, or still needed more power, due to Piccolo having absorbed Elder Guru's ability to activate hidden potential, that could still be rectified without a drawback to his lifespan. The greater numbers advantage would also mean that Gas's zombie state would be less effective, and even if it still was, instead of needing to rely on a Frieza, it's generally possible that this version of Piccolo, Goku, and Vegeta simply have enough mastery over God Ki to pull off a Hakai, or for them to just seal Gas with a Mafuba. Then, they'd use the Namekian Dragon Balls to reverse the effects of Granolah's lifespan, and the damage to planet Siri. Honestly, they could probably just revive the Ceruleans, since that is something that Granolah would genuinely be interested in, as opposed to the Saiyans. And that's just if none of the wishes made in this timeline beforehand would have done so, invalidating this entire arc. Of course, assuming that isn't the case, this would officially induct Granolah into the same category of off-planet part-time Z fighter alongside Broly, and making him therefore perfect to add to Piccolo, Goku, and Vegeta's sparring roster, with the quartet probably grabbing Broly, and then likely even going off to find the very time chamber Frieza was using to test themselves in, after healing up and conveniently keeping them out of the way for the events of Dragon Ball Super Hero in the Piccolo Turned Good Early timeline. Like in canon, with the strongest warriors on Earth so often stepping away for the sake of their own training, it often falls to warriors like Buu, Gohan, the boys, and even Nail when asked to do a favor and guard another planet while his other men look after Namek, to watch over the planet Earth during times the world's strongest are absent. During this point, however, we find Nail overlooking the Earth from the lookout and pondering many of his past slip-ups and mistakes, such as failing to drive off the Frieza Force by himself the way Master Piccolo was able to, as well as his doubting that Team Universe 7 could win the Tournament of Power, leading to the formation of that out-of-control dark Super Namekian slug when he fought Sao No and Polina. And as of most recently, history has repeated itself with his failure to protect Namek against the Wizard Moro. Though to keep himself busy and from dwelling on the past totally, Nail has tried to begin a more productive daily routine while here on Earth, watering the plants on the lookout with Mr. Popo, and then attempting to convince Buu, Gohan, Goten, and Trunks into training, though ultimately only to also fail at this, thanks to the Majin being more preoccupied with sleeping, eating, and playing well when Piccolo is away, Gohan being preoccupied with his studies, and constantly bumming Nail or whoever else into picking Pan up from school for him. And Goten and Trunks these days are too busy pursuing the inane goal of being superheroes and getting girlfriends. Thus, Nail more often than not during this trip is left with nothing to do but train with Pan, as she usually does so with Piccolo when he or Grandpa Goku have time. Meaning this version of Pan is also, like most of the other cast members, way stronger than her canon counterpart. It is while pondering these past failures and his current situation though, that Nail is attacked by a strange heroically dressed android, bearing the crest of the Red Ribbon Army, which due to Nail being present during the Cell Saga in this timeline, he is fully able to recognize and remember the history of. of. On the other hand, because he is also a Namekian, Gamma 2 assumes that this must still be Demon King Piccolo, giving Nail extra incentive to fight this warrior whose power he can't sense, and defend his teacher and friend's honor. Though when facing off with this new android declaring itself as Gamma 2, and Snail tries to put up the best fight he can and show the fruits of the training that is now being interrupted, things still go about exactly as they would in canon, thanks to Nail only being a bit stronger than Piccolo would be at this stage, seeing him defeated but not finished off, and more importantly, allured to the resurrected Red Ribbon threat. However, just like Piccolo would, I think he would recognize this as an opportunity to get himself out of his own rut, as well as to remind his fellow students of the Dragon Warrior Namek that their master's first lesson was to always be prepared for battle, and the possibility that even stronger foes exist beyond the horizon. This leads Nail to seeking the help and counsel of Bulma and Mr. Popo, who both see where the Namekian warrior is coming from, and actually humor the idea that as the temporary guardian at this point, it is his final decision how to defend Earth. To this end, Nail decides he must no longer be the one to simply hold the line, and must obtain the power to finish his fights, and so next employing the help of the Namekians, he invites one of their young talented Dragon Clan members in Dende to come to Earth, and to hold a position as co-guardian, or attendant, to Boo's usual status, allowing that Namek to be the creator of a new set of Dragon Balls for Shenron, which Bulma is also very much for, having a long list of wishes she's wanted to abuse, that Piccolo is not indulged, though for now, they'll be using these for a wish to allow Dende to awaken potential like an elder, which Nail then undergoes to unlock his own ultimate mystic powers for the fight ahead. Next, the warrior Namek hatches a plan with Pan, to fake her kidnapping by the Red Ribbon Army, after Nail is able to infiltrate its base, with the goal being for the news of this to highly motivate Goten, Trunks, Gohan, and Boo. As the real battle with the Gammas starts, Gohan and Nail assault the hidden Red Ribbon Army base, with Gohan taking on Gamma 1, while Nail rematches Gamma 2, to the same result as canon of the two sides eventually realizing neither of them are nearly as villainous as they initially believed. However, due to being stronger than Piccolo, Nail doesn't need to use the something extra Dende and Shenron gave him just yet, and is able to fight evenly with, and then defeat Gamma 2 with his mystic power awakened alone. This makes the new leader of the Red Ribbon Army, now rebranded as a pharmaceutical company, Magenta, very desperate, seeing him run away to unleash the third creation of the Gamma's creator, Dr. Hedo, the unknowing supervillain rival to Goten and Trunks' alter egos, Cell Max, with Dr. Hedo failing to stop him, as the beast modeled after the original bio-android Menace goes on a rampage. As Cell Max goes berserk, the assembled Earth fighters do their best to hold him off without Goku, Vegeta, or Piccolo around to help them, though thankfully, after the events of Moro, they are far better prepared than they would be in canon, but their increased strength is mitigated by the mechanical nature of Cell Max, being scaled to their feats and strength in this timeline as well, with the increased coordination of the Z fighters being their true ultra advantage. Eventually, this forces Nail to go even further beyond, tapping into a power that connects him with the ancient Namekian warrior ways more than ever before, seeing his foundation and resolve become stronger than the roots of the Argisa trees, as he obtains an orange and giant orange form that allow him to battle near evenly with Cell Max, much better than even Piccolo was able to in canon. And with this increase in battle strength and the Gammas working together with Orange Nail to buy time and push Cell Max back even further, Gohan is also able to center himself. Using his better training in this timeline, he achieves a new form beyond his newly discovered ultimate power that Goten and Trunks have dubbed Beast Gohan. And while not wanting to be left out, the more disciplined tag team duo decide to employ the fusion dance and form Gotenks for the first time since their latest growth spurt, thankfully pulling off the dance without a hitch despite their larger bodies, and giving a glimpse of what the strength of a full-grown Gotenks looks like. And thanks to this joint force of incredibly powerful superhero warriors, being far more fearsome a group of foes to take on all at once for Cell Max than he had to face in canon, it is only a matter of time before the fact that this version of Cell Max is also much stronger than his original counterpart would become meaningless. And even if the giant bio-android could further transform into an equivalent perfect or super perfect state, all the fighters present are already familiar with the regeneration gimmick of Cell, and their combined power is only said to continue growing. Not to mention, this stronger force means that Gamma 2 never really needs to sacrifice himself, meaning it's possible they never even get tired while fighting, and if nothing else, the same solution employed against Moro could be relied upon here, with Boo simply absorbing everyone to defeat Cell Max. Regardless, the superhero arc in this timeline would also conclude in a highly idealized manner, leaving the only thing in the main canon left to discuss being the epilogue of Superhero, which I do want to cover in its own video, if only to have some fun choreographing an Orange Nail versus Dragon Warrior Piccolo fight. There is also of course the eventual adaptation of an End of Z, which looms in this timeline, and what may possibly even lie beyond that, but that's where this what if story ends off for right now.